Hi, everyone, and welcome to Media Capital, a podcast where consumer investing meets media innovation. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Reed Dickens, CEO and founder at LA Golf, a brand redefining performance and innovation in one of the most tradition-bound sports. Before LA Golf, Reed was the founding CEO of Marucci Sports, which became the first SPAC in Major League Baseball. His experience spans building athlete-led brands, scaling premium performance products, and challenging legacy industries. And we'll discuss more in today's episode. And a quick disclaimer, LA Golf is an MFG portfolio company. Reed, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Reed, let's start from the top. You've gone from the West Wing to the baseball diamond to golf courses across the country. Can you walk us through that journey and how each chapter led you to LA Golf?
Yeah, I think for any entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, unless you're a subject matter expert, I think usually the adventure is pretty opportunistic and reactive. It's probably more so than most founders would like to admit. I read that the governor of Texas was running for president and drove over to Austin, Texas, talked my way past the security guard, became a volunteer, then an intern, then an assistant, ended up becoming a very young White House spokesman. Had a surreal experience. I was not important in any way. I was not a senior level official, but I did have a front row seat for some of the most historic events in our nation's history. I gave one of my first White House official statement on the record as a White House spokesman was on the field at Yankee Stadium when he threw out the iconic first pitch at the World Series. I was the last person in the Oval Office with him on the night of September 11th. So I just had some really incredible experiences. I traveled around the world on Air Force One, but more importantly for my career, got to sit in the room with the CEO of the country and everything from crisis management to just execution of vision and strategy to managing big personalities, managing the media news cycle. It was an incredible experience. But after about 4 years, I had really accomplished everything I had ever thought possible in politics in that very short 4 years. Most people spend their whole career in DC to be able to experience some of the things I was able to experience. And so I had an opportunity. I was the television spokesman for his reelection campaign. And I just had this burning desire since I was a child to live in LA. I grew up watching Saved by the Bell and 90210. And I had met my now wife at a party in New York, and she lived in LA. And so I headed out to LA. 20 years now, I've been in Southern California launching consumer product companies. The one I spent the most time on was obviously Marucci Sports. We became the #1 brand in every product category at every age group from Little League to Major League Baseball. It was a really amazing experience. We had a truly differentiated product. We had a better product. We also had a technology story, and most equipment companies at the time didn't have a technology story. And we also had the players as investors as opposed to marketing, just using them for photo ops. And we were very rambunctious. Me and my co-founders were young. We made fun of all the old incumbents in the industry. YouTube was new at the time, so we made hundreds of videos making fun of Louisville Slugger and Easton and some of the old incumbent companies. And within about 5, 6 years, I became the #1 baseball bat in the industry. And we ended up exiting that business to private equity in 2020. And along that time, I was on a vacation with my family, and I actually said to some friends, I said, what if I could go play golf or go on golf trips and say to my wife that I'm going to work? And everyone laughed. Then when they went to bed, my brain was spinning. And like most addicted serial entrepreneurs, I started playing on GoDaddy looking for web domains, and I bought the name LA Golf. And I love LA. I think LA is one of the most recognizable brands in the world, especially it's kind of the vortex of live experiences between the World Cup and the Olympics are coming here in 28 and Super Bowl was here last year. And so there was just a lot going on. And I'm a big believer that it takes decades or billions of dollars to build name recognition. And I was fortunate enough to acquire two words that have global recognition, LA and golf. And I set out on an adventure to try to find opportunities in the golf space. And so that's brought us to where we are today.
So you mentioned LA Golf just now. You probably get this asked 100 times. Is it LA Golf or La Golf? And I'm sure there's probably a reason behind one or the other.
Yeah, it's LA Golf. We, for aesthetic, cleanliness, and also for trademark reasons, we don't put the periods in there the way you would if you were writing in proper grammar. But yeah, it's LA Golf. And I'm a big fan of LA. I believe it's an aspirational city. It's an aspirational brand. For hundreds of years, at least in the US, people have been trying to make their way to the West Coast for opportunity. And also, there's a lot of brands, LA Fitness, LA Hair. There's a lot of businesses that have built global brands, taking advantage of that global recognition of the name LA.
Yeah. And I'm very curious. I think we spoke about this in the past. Essentially, you have almost a playbook, if you like, that you're applying to LA Golf from the past. But before we get into some of the lessons that maybe you acquired through building Marucci Sports into now doing LA Golf, I'm curious, how has your time in the White House shaped your approach to leadership and messaging? Was there a moment or perhaps a series of moments there that shaped how you are right now as a leader?
I want to make sure not to conflate leadership and messaging. So on the messaging side, because I was a spokesperson, we were in the White House 2000, 2004, and that was pre-social media. And so on one hand, you would think that the game has totally changed, and it has, obviously, in terms of tactics. But in terms of strategy, actually, the rules of messaging really are more true than they've ever been, which is number one, I try to teach my team to never get message fatigue, right? Every time you're saying something for the 1000th time, someone's hearing it for the first time. And I think so many brands rebrand before anyone even knows their brand, right? There's so many brands have to try to refresh their messaging. Most of that is driven by agencies who work on billable hours, right? Who think you have to always have something new. But I actually read a study on brand saliency the other day. I think it was out of London. It was a talk talking about how the most effective, impactful, and recognizable brands. There was about 5 brands, one of them being Kit Kat, Coca-Cola, and they're brands who've never changed their color scheme, their jingle, their font, their logo, their tagline. They've never changed. And it allows time for penetration and recognition. And penetration and recognition is very expensive, right? And so I believe message fatigue is one of the biggest problems in the consumer brand world, is that people get message fatigue. They've heard themselves say something 1,000 times, so they assume everyone has heard it 1,000 times, and they move on and change their messaging, and they're constantly tweaking and adapting their messaging. And the truth is, the message never has time to penetrate. I think the second message rule I learned from my time as a White House spokesman is the one sentence rule. Really, it was a discipline, almost like a muscle that one of my mentors and my boss was really adamant about. You can spend $1 billion on advertising, but most people only remember one sentence per topic. It's just human nature. You can have a conversation with someone for 5 minutes or an hour, and they're usually going to remember one sentence per topic. And so deciding what that sentence is ahead of time and reinforcing it over and over, as opposed to trying to make 5 different technology points or 5 different performance points about a product, and people aren't going to remember it, then you're giving them the opportunity to choose what they remember, as opposed to if you just pick one message and stick with it, then you're controlling what sticks in the consumer's mind. So I think message fatigue and having that discipline to know that attention span is very low in the world today, and you're only going to get one sentence to stick. I think on the leadership side, being able to shadow a president of the United States, I learned at a very young age that having long-term perspective informs your short-term decision making. I think so many, especially young founders and young CEOs, are really reactive. If there's an emergency or something in the stock market or something in the industry or something in the supply chain, there's a lot of panic and reacting. I try to spend a good percentage of my time thinking 5 years out, and I try to spend another chunk of my time thinking 1 year out. I have a really good management team that can deal with what's going on today, with executing our plan today and this month. My job as a CEO is to think about what are we doing a year from now, what are we doing 5 years from now, and I think that helps me not be as reactive to positive or negative events. And I think that was something watching the president of the United States every day. Things would blow up in the news or on the front page of the New York Times or the front page of the Financial Times, and everyone will be breathless, clutching their pearls, and the president wouldn't even know what we were talking about. He didn't even care what was going on in the news of the day because he knew those news organizations are just trying to get clicks and generate revenue. That's not real news. He used to always say, I'm making the news, and we're deciding what the news is. And historians won't decide whether we're right or wrong for 100 years. Why do I care what Elizabeth Buehler from the New York Times said this morning? And so I think having that long-term perspective was probably one of the best things I got from being around the president.
And Reed, I have actually a couple of questions on what you said, because obviously the latest TV campaign went live just a couple of months ago. The creative was brilliantly done with Bryson DeChambeau, and it was quite humorous and a very nice play on words and mentioning La Golf throughout the creative. Is that something that you normally get involved in the creative process? How involved are you?
The creative process is really my hobby. I'm probably a rare CEO. Most CEOs come up on the finance side or the operations side. I started my career on the PR and marketing side, and my first company I ever had was a brand agency. I made my first money as a young entrepreneur by creating brands for other people, and then eventually created a few brands for myself and my shareholders. It's not a micromanaging control issue. It's really more of a passion and an enjoyment. And I realized at a young age, I write and direct all the commercials, and I generally come up with it. I at least come up with the general concept and direction for all of our creative, whether it's digital, television, or in print, whether we have a magazine, a full page magazine ad, whatever. I generally come up with the ideas and the concept. As a founder, I think about this business more than anyone else by a long shot. I also have a lot of experience using words as weapons, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but commercializing words. I've been doing that for 25 years, and I have that muscle is pretty mature and developed in my brain. And so, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on an agency who's never thought about my business before, I've just found to be a very inefficient exercise. The bigger we get and the busier I get, sometimes we'll bring in an agency. Like recently for this Bryson DeChambeau golf commercial, I brought in an agency to handle the production and to polish some of the scripts and to get it ready for television. But 85% were ideas I came up with in my sauna, and I voice dictate on my walks at night.
Obviously, you're building an international brand, which, it is manufactured in the US, but you have really big plans going into and already being present in many continents. We even talked about Asia. And you mentioned something about younger founders being reactive. Obviously, what's happening right now geopolitically, sometimes it's hard not to. And this will be the last political related question I have for you on this podcast. But how are you thinking in terms of this recent conversations around tariffs, cost, and building a brand that will be long lasting? How could that essentially impact you, if at all?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not thinking much about it at all. And I know that may be shocking, but we only make a few component parts in China. Most of what we make is here in the US. And I want to make a note that in Marucci, we made everything in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It was all American made. And that had nothing to do with geopolitics, had nothing to do with nativism or anything political. It has to do when you're making a premium brand, it has to do with quality control. It has to do with being able to make running changes quickly. Someone doesn't like the sound of a putter or something's coming loose. We can walk in the factory, make the change right then, and the next batch of putters is going to be perfect, right? You don't have to wait on 100,000 units to come over on a cargo ship and then find out they're wrong. I actually experienced that one time with aluminum baseball bats. We got our first really large shipment from China, and the adhesive that they had agreed to make for the knob of the baseball bat, not to get too technical, they had decided to use something different than what we had agreed to. And we had about 10,000 knobs fall out of the bats on live televisions at high profile events because the factory had decided to use a different glue than what we agreed to save themselves like one penny. And so, to me, manufacturing domestically is about quality control and about speed of change. But yes, it's convenient that we don't have to deal with the tariff as much as possible. For our driver heads, which is one of our most important component parts, we forge those in China. Most of the major brands in golf do forge their driver heads in China. And there's obviously a cost to that, but we're very fortunate. When you have a premium brand, you can adjust the retail price slightly, and most of our customers won't think twice about it. In premium goods, you don't have that much of a price sensitive customer, right? You have a customer who wants the hottest brand, who wants the newest, latest, greatest thing, and who wants the best technology. Typically, it's not price driven decisions. So, combined with most of our stuff being manufactured in the US and the fact that we're a premium brand, the tariffs are not something I wake up having to think about, fortunately.
Yeah, exactly. It's that price elasticity. And I think very often, sometimes the easiest way to make the case in the boardroom about why investing in brands, it's the pricing strength that you retain, especially in times like this. I'm curious, and you briefly mentioned why golf, but I also want you to talk a bit about why ballet golf, sorry, is special, the technology that actually goes into creating these products, and what you've seen in the market that others haven't perhaps or ignored, because it's a quite a traditional sport. There's obviously a lot of room for disruption. So I'm very curious how you chose this sector. Why golf?
I chose this sector to put it very simply and candidly. I love golf. I love hosting friends. I love cigars and tequila. I love gambling on the golf course. I always have loved golf, the camaraderie of golf. I love the challenge of golf. There's never a time that you can master golf. So, because I had already built one sports equipment brand, it made a lot of sense because I had a playbook. And also 2020, 2021, with a lot of the businesses shut down, I had a lot of time to reflect on what worked and what didn't work. A lot of lessons learned from that 10-year journey with Marucci. And what's interesting is that getting a do-over is very rare, right? The LA Golf is almost a do-over. I'm getting to redeploy the same strategic playbook, but with some big and some small tweaks, right? And number one is that the first company I had co-founders, and I spent probably a third to half of my time arguing or debating with my co-founders and my board about direction or tactics, even though I was the CEO. And when I had a year to walk around my neighborhood at night during the shutdown during 2020, I had this quiet realization upon reflection that when I look back at all those big disagreements we had and all the time we spent arguing, I was right about everything. And a lot of times people think I'm going to say something different, but I really realized that I needed to trust my instincts more. One of the things with LA Golf is I didn't want to have any co-founders. I wanted to have a business that I controlled. I think you build the airplane, then you build the runway, and then there's takeoff. And I think as in aviation, the most dangerous and most stressful and most taxing part of the flight is getting to 10,000 feet altitude to get to cruising altitude. And I think while we're building the plane and during takeoff, I don't think that anyone should be in the cockpit with the founder. And I believe that very strongly. And so that's one difference. There's a lot of things I realized I was right about, which is that having the players as partners, we don't use them for photo opportunities. They actually wire money. They're invested in the business, and we use them in every aspect of the R&D, for the product, for dealing with investor relations, every aspect of our business. We rely on Bryson DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson and these player partners. And so there was a lot of things that we did well. Also, we never put our name on a product. We never did any gimmicky training aids. We never put our name on something just because, oh, everyone's buying XYZ products, so we're going to go make that product. We never chased the consumers. We made products that we believed were core to the success of the best players in the game. We call them tools of the trade. We made tools of the trade for the best players in the game. We never chased trends, and we had a lot of opportunity. When you have a hot brand, I always say you can make anything from umbrellas to tampons. There's nothing you can't make if you have a hot brand, but we were very disciplined. And that was another thing I carried over to LA Golf, is that we're going to make the core tools of the trade, right? We started with shafts, then putters, then balls. Now our driver and irons are coming out right now as we speak. The driver is out and the irons come out this summer. And so we're making core products, but we're innovating them. We have never put our name on a product in Marucci and baseball that didn't have a true differentiator, a performance enhancing technological differentiator, right? Every product we put our name on was best in class. And I think I can say that objectively because we became the number one brand in the sport. And in LA Golf, we haven't put our name on any product yet that wasn't demonstrably best in class. Now, we may not have $300 million a year to spend on marketing like Callaway, TaylorMade, and Titleist do. And so we might not have the market share to reflect the superiority of the technology, but everything we put our name on has a performance enhancing technology story to it. We've used materials no one's ever used before. We use design structures no one's ever used before. We have technology embedded in our products that no one's ever used before. We actually utilize AI, whereas most of the major brands just talk about AI in their marketing. So yeah, this is definitely a redo. It's very rare. At 17 years older, a little bit wiser, I get to deploy the same strategy with a few tweaks.
So the usage of athletes was actually a very informed decision. And you talk about the products being tech heavy. Do Bryson or Dustin get actually involved in the feedback of making the product and the innovation that comes directly from the players?
Bryson is not just involved. I would say he's like our co-head of R&D. He's a co-designer of every product. We just launched with this driver, which we believe is the most innovative in probably 30 years. That was Bryson's design idea. The commentators on television sometimes will talk about Bryson like he's a hobbyist, like he's just constantly experimenting. That's what they love to say. Oh, he's just experimenting. No, that's what other players do. Other players go to their brands, their manufacturers, and they ask for lots of product, and they're constantly tinkering and experimenting. Bryson is on a computer CAD model designing product. There's no one like Bryson. I tell people all the time, and I mean it literally, not just proverbially. Bryson is an Elon Musk of golf. And what I mean by that is when Elon Musk started SpaceX, he fired the CTO. He bought a book called Rockets for Dummies, and he designed his own rocket that now NASA is hitching rides to space. He didn't just raise the capital and deal with the investors, and he had four other companies he was building. He actually designed the rocket, built the rocket, right? And Bryson is the first player to ever win a major championship with products that he designed himself. And that's a very unique trait. We're very grateful to have him as a partner.
This is actually a nice segue reading through this section. We call this a shout out moment where sometimes previous guests decided to call out an investor or founder or a mentor, somebody that had an impact on you, could be Ferry Golf or right now in the business. Is there anybody in your network that you could think of?
Listen, I don't think it should be surprising. I wouldn't be here without George W. Bush. He was not only a mentor to me, but he was a really good boss. I was too young at the time. I always joke that I think back of times I got in trouble or I made mistakes. I always say, I don't know who decided to let a 26-year-old in the Oval Office during two wars, right? It's not my fault, man, but I didn't put myself in that role. But he was a very patient boss. And I got to be in the room and watch really hard decisions get made and watch really hard strategies get implemented and executed. I got to watch him deal with criticism, deal with crisis, deal with a mom who just lost a son in war, slapping him in the face and crying. Everything you can imagine from the morning till evening. How I think about business, how I think about strategy, how I think about decision making really was shaped at a young age by President Bush. And I'm really grateful that I got a chance. In terms of LA golf, I have to give a shout out to Kelly James. Kelly James is a musician. He entertains at celebrity golf events. He entertains at a lot of sports events. In fact, he entertains at a lot of PGA Tour events. And when I started LA Golf, I think one of the advantages, but it's a double-edged sword in terms of a pro and con, is I didn't know anyone in golf. And so I was thinking the other day that almost everyone I know in golf, I met through Kelly James, who's on my advisory board. And so he's definitely the person I would shout out for LA Golf.
And in terms of going back to building a challenger brand, you actually mentioned what happened to Marucci and the fact that being focused on quality is important. And you walked us through that example of what happened. But maybe in terms of LA Golf, was there perhaps a moment where things came off the rail or the other way around? In fact, was there a moment that you thought, okay, we just changed the game?
Both. I think I read a very high profile venture capital investor in Silicon Valley said in a panel the other day that most founders are not honest with the public or themselves about how often things go off the rail, or how close you walk to the edge of disaster for a long time. You hear about it sometimes in the book 10 years later when they write a book or in the movie, but most founders aren't very honest with anyone or including themselves about how, as an entrepreneur, you really live on the edge of insolvency. You really live on the edge of disaster, right? All the time. For myself, this wasn't intentional, but I co founded Marucci during the 2008 and 2009 crisis and founded LA Golf. We launched our first product in February of 2020 with Bryson DeChambeau. And 1 month later, the United States got shut down. And so I had raised just enough capital to take that new product. We had spent 2 years designing Bryson's shafts, and then we had created shafts for the everyday golfer. And we launched those products February of 2020, and then the whole world shut down. It was very difficult. I had to put every dollar I had ever made from my exit from Marucci into LA Golf. I had a choice. I either had to shut the company down and liquidate the assets, or I had to put all my chips on the table and keep going. And I believed I had a few things that made this special. I had the experience of having done it before. I had Bryson DeChambeau, who I felt like was a generational player, and I had the name LA Golf, which I felt like had the potential to being $1 billion brand, a lifestyle brand one day, and I still believe it will be. 2020 was a good example, but even more recently, about 2 years ago, a few of our largest distributors, one in the UK, one in Korea, and our largest customer in the US, at the same time didn't pay their bill. And when you're an early stage company, you don't have the cash cushion to withstand a blow like that. So we had a really stressful few months. I had to go raise some emergency capital. We missed a payroll. We had to lay some people off. There were blogs writing stories that LA Golf was going bankrupt. And then what's funny is that there was one blog that wrote that I was throwing lavish parties in Beverly Hills while we were laying people off. You go through all this criticism, and it was actually very interesting for me because I learned from watching President Bush as a young kid not to listen to the noise, right? He used to always say that people who are making the news don't listen to people who are pontificating about the news, right? But when it's personal, when it's about you as a founder, I learned that no one who has time to comment on social media, no one who is a troll or a critic, they've never done anything meaningful in their life. No one who's busy building something, no one who's busy creating anything in the world of value has time to be a critic. You know, the old adage that don't ever listen to criticism or advice from someone that you wouldn't want to be like, that you don't aspire to be. One thing I learned through the toughest times a couple years ago when we had that really tough stretch is that all the criticism is coming from people who I don't care what they think anyway, right? They're not people who've ever built anything, run anything, done anything, or created anything of value in the world. So I shouldn't be listening to them, right? And so I really should just stay focused on my shareholders and my family. And I think that was a really good lesson.
I completely agree to that. I think the challenge these days is that there's a lot of negative headlines And I think that it just gets reinforced and reinforced because it's human nature, isn't it? People react to anything that could be a threat. So we start looking inwards and consuming that very negative content. I completely agree. So, Reed, I have a quick fire round of questions. These are supposed to be relatively short, like 30, 40 seconds. One question, and this is going to might be a tough one, but if you were to build another venture, perhaps in a different sector, what industry or space would you go after next and why?
Content, for sure. I think the content world is in a crisis right now. AI is now recreating Oscar winning movies so well that the experts can't tell the difference. AI is creating commercials, Super Bowl commercials that are indistinguishable from the real thing. AI is creating better television series than human writers for a fraction of the cost. We created all the graphics and promotions for our driver launch on AI without paying any agency, without paying any production company. So it puts a premium on ideas. And I feel like I've always found some success having contrarian ideas or unique ideas. And I've always been an idea person. And so having the ability to execute those ideas quickly at a low cost and iterate, test, and launch at a fraction of the cost, I think it gives an advantage to people who can solve big problems and come up with big ideas. If you had a big idea or you had a solution for a big problem, you had to go into government, right, to get the capital, or you had to go into private equity to raise the capital to be able to make the commercial or to create the movie. Now, if you have a big solution or a big idea, you can use AI to create it cheaply and quickly. Even for LA Golf, I think content is going to be a really interesting space to explore.
It is true that you can do so much more with less nowadays and on a fraction of the cost. But do you think that is also going to make it a lot more challenging to stand out, or it's going to create a lot more competition then?
Good ideas typically always stand out. And I don't know what the world's going to be like in 5 years. I think one of the problems is that people are behaving and thinking like the world's changing slowly, when really I think it's changing violently fast. So I can't speak to what the world will look like in 5 years. But for right now, I think good ideas and big ideas still make you stand out. I think the AI is just really accelerating the execution.
Is there a brand or a founder that you deeply respect, not just for what they built, but how they built it, perhaps for ideas they had?
Yeah, one of my favorite brands in terms of just respect, I'm a big fan of founders. I've probably read over 1,000 biographies in my life between magazine articles, profiles, and books. But one founder that I know personally, it's a brand called Built, BYLT, Built Basics. And he built it completely from scratch. He owns 100% of the company. It's a direct to consumer online apparel. They make basic apparels, t shirts, workout clothes, golf clothes, and it's high quality but very basic clothing. And he built the brand from scratch and he distributes it out of Southern California, and everything's direct to consumer. It's very high margin, and they're making hundreds of millions of dollars now from something he started in his dorm room in college. So I really admire their brand.
Awesome. Final question for you, Reed. So you built LA Golf into a brand that's redefining performance and style in the sports industry. As you look ahead, what's your long-term vision for the brand?
My long-term vision is for LA Golf to be a one-stop shop for anything related to equipment, media, instruction, entertainment, lifestyle for golf. It's really unfortunate what golf does to the consumer. I say all the time that the major brands in golf have mastered making money from the consumer without solving any problems for the consumer. Right now, if you want to buy a set of golf clubs, you have to go to TaylorMade and buy a driver, and then you have to go somewhere else and get a better shaft, and you have to hire someone to fit it to piece it together, and then you have to go do it all again the next year. And if you want to get instruction, you have to go to a different company. It's a very fragmented industry that puts the logistical and financial burden on the customer. I want to be a one stop shop for equipment and lifestyle and entertainment and instruction and media that is a seamless, frictionless experience for the customer. That's our long term vision.
Is there a market perhaps that you're targeting after the US a lot more than before?
Korea, for sure. Korea is an incredible market because they are so passionate about golf. Golf is what they do for a pastime. If they're going on a first date, if they're going on a business meeting, anything you do in Korea, you do it over golf. Also, the men don't typically wear shirts more than one time. So the average successful businessman will have 300 golf shirts. So for a lot of reasons, I love the Korean market. That'll be probably our next point. But we're going to be obviously looking for distribution partners everywhere from the UK to Southeast Asia, even Australia. Right now, we're launching product in North Africa. So we're going to be all over the world, but Korea is the one I'm probably most excited about.
Thanks so much, Reed, for your time. And we're very excited at MFG to be part of that journey and support as you scale through. And really appreciate having this discussion with you today.
We love having you guys as partners, and thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Reid. Thank you for joining us on Media Capital. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, follow the pod, and subscribe at MediaForGrowth.com.
Fundraising just got a whole lot smarter. This May 22nd in New York City, we're flipping the script on traditional pitching, bringing you 15 top investors ready to pitch to consumer founders. Instead of chasing VCs, you'll hear directly from them, understanding not just their investment thesis, but their personality, vision, and approach. If you're a Series A+ consumer brand raising now or in the next 6 to 9 months, this is where you need to be. For more information, visit the events section on MediaForGrowth.co.